Morning, everybody. It's really great to be able to join you today to talk about engaging with business and particularly thinking about sustainability. As Louisa said, my name's Kirsty. I'm the Associate Dean at the University's Business School. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit today, if I can, about how we engage with business and specifically in terms of connecting to our speakers a little bit later on, about how our connection, and by that I mean the business school with our businesses in our community, might support the emergence of what I've described as our sustainability leaders of the future, our students. Next slide, please. So by way of introduction, I'm an academic, I like models. I've put together this very, very simple model, and I'd like to offer the idea of our students, our citizen students, at the centre, who are at the centre of our new organisational strategy, connecting both to the university and to your organisation. And the arrows between the circles point both ways. And obviously that is symbolising or illustrating a very simple way of how, and I emphasise the how, we might connect. But of course, that very simple diagram doesn't really talk to us about why we should connect and how we could engage purposefully, and I'll emphasize that word, purposeful, with each other. Next slide, please. So this is a great quote, I think, from Alfred Kelly Jr. Visa's quadrupled in size in terms of employees in the last 10 years. And a growing number of that base is millennials, which is a very purpose-oriented demographic. Our purpose is our North Star and helps us attract great talent who want to create shared value for our business, their communities, and the world. Now, that quote really resonates with me because of the work that we do with our students. Our students are very purpose-oriented. And they're very keen on ideas around climate change and sustainability. But we want to ensure that those values don't just remain within the students themselves, that actually they use that as a motivation to share that with our wider communities, particularly in relation to sustainability. But as my previous slide identified, we need to be able to engage and connect meaningfully, both with our communities and our business community, and with purpose, to really be able to put that quote into practice. Next slide, please. So this is sort of our current reality. I think this symbolises, where we are at the moment. This is actually a picture of our student volunteer ambassadors. Sat on a bench on the university campus in Chester. And connecting right at the minute isn't very straightforward. I'm talking to you via a screen. I can't see you. I can't hear you. It's very difficult for us to connect on a human level when we're just talking to a screen. And so we've had to adapt. You will have had to have adapted your business practices, both socially and professionally, to ensure, and we've had to do that with our students. We've had to, and with our academic programs, to make sure that our students have continued to receive the education that they would have expected. But of course, life isn't as we have expected. It's not happened in the way that we would have expected over the last 12 months. But in the last week, well, weeks maybe, we've got every reason to be optimistic about how things might change in the future. And we might maybe start to consider about how we move now, because we've had that break. Maybe we do start to think more about a sustainable future. And our other speakers today will talk more about how that applies to them and to their businesses directly. But now I'd like to think about how we could develop a model of sustainable leadership. How do we develop our students, two of whom are in the picture there? How do we develop traits, leadership traits, to enable them to become sustainable leaders of the future? And what competencies and what skills do they need in order to be able to do that for you in your organizations? So next slide, please. So the next couple of slides are in around a study that was undertaken by the Russell Reynolds Associates as part of the United Nations Global Compact. And it was all about the characteristics of sustainable business leaders. Now, in an earlier study back in 2018, again, a UN Global Impact study, but this time with Accenture, 48 of the chief execs interviewed in that study, in that 2018 study, were actually integrating sustainability into their operations. However, 92% of that same sample group believed that integration of sustainability was absolutely critical to success. So there's a differential there in between reality and the commitment. So there's a really high evidence of commitment to sustainability. However, the reality, and I'm sure you'll find this in your own organisations, is much more difficult to achieve. A further statistic, which was lower again, only 21% of that same group of CEOs believed that their business is playing a vital or critical role in achieving the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So we've got really high commitment, differing levels of reality. Well, why is that? And so I'll leave that question mark in the air just for now. So I return then to the 2020 study, because that's the bit really that I'd like us to focus on, particularly in relation to our students and their potential to become the workforce of the future. So in this particular study, and for those of you who don't know, Russell Reynolds Associates are a global leadership advisory and search firm. They're multinational, and they interviewed 55 global chief execs and directors. Just as a slight aside, 34% of whom were women. And those 55 individuals had a track record of driving change and transformation by integrating sustainability into their business practice and strategy. And those 55 individuals were asked about their approach to sustainability. What do they do and how did they do it? And the study looked to identify those characteristics in those individuals that differentiated them in terms of motivation, competence, and action against a sample group of 50 chief execs who were from the lower performing Fortune 500 companies in relation to sustainability. Now, what did they find? Well, they found that sustainability, they described these 55 individuals as sustainability pioneers. They were pioneering in the way that they managed transformation in their business. And they had this, and the quote is there, they had a purpose-driven belief that their business is not just a commercial activity, divorced from those wider societal environmental contexts in which it operates. So their business starts to connect more broadly to those more sustainable goals. And in the study, the background of those individuals was also examined, particularly on their motivation, why did they do what they did, and their journey to become a chief exec. And the study places those 55 chief execs into one of three categories. The born believers, so those individuals who have always had a passion for the environment from a very young age. So the born believers, the convinced, so those individuals who over a period of time have become increasingly convinced with an increasing understanding of how important sustainability is in strategy. And then the third category was the awoken. So those individuals who have had a pivotal moment in their career that's enabled them to see the value, the real value of being sustainable in their business practice. So I'd just like you to sort of take a little moment to think about where you are. Are you a born believer? Are you a convinced? Or are you awoken? Or are you not sure? And we'll maybe just dwell on that a little bit while we then go to the next slide. So this is the outcome of the study. So the study found that these sustainability pioneers were 3 times more likely than that sample group of non-sustainable pioneers to have worked on 2 or more continents. So they're much more likely to have had international experience. They're also 2 times more likely to have career experience of different functions within the organisation. So their broader experience of life, maybe more generally, and of industry, really enhance their leadership skills, particularly in relation to sustainability. Interestingly, these leaders were almost 2 times more likely than that control group to have had experience in operations and supply chain. So they could actually see the impact of their business in that wider community. So regardless of that journey, though, these sustainability pioneers had a really strong sense of purpose. So, you know, I emphasize that word at the beginning, and I re-emphasize that word now. They had a really strong sense of purpose and personal motivation. They were absolutely set on this is a sustainable mindset. That's where they saw the business. They saw the business from that perspective. And they had a differentiated set of competencies from this sample group, from the control group. And the combination of the sustainable mindset with this differentiated set of competencies meant that they were able to drive transformation, and they could drive transformation within, but also beyond their organisation, because they understood the importance of the place of that organisation in their wider communities. Hence the quote on the previous page. That sustainable mindset is made up of 4 different competencies. And these things were all found in these individuals, these 55 individuals. So in terms of multi-level systems thinking, these individuals were naturally curious. They wanted to know about the world and find out about the world. They also had very high levels of ambition and were results oriented. So they were very keen to make sure that what they did actually resulted in change. In terms of stakeholder inclusion, these individuals, these leaders, these sustainability pioneers had a very strong sense of empathy. So they understood the position of those others, for example, in the supply chain, because they were more likely to have had experience of those different positions within the supply chain, and also in different countries, so the different experiences of that in different places. And they were very much authentic leaders. They were who they were on the tin. They were individuals who were very focused on what they believed, and what they believed came out in what they did. So they were very authentic in their activity. They had the courage, in relation to disruptive innovation, they had the courage to challenge the status quo. They were happy to take risk, and particularly around ideas of sustainability, because quite often you have to be innovative to reconcile sustainability challenges, and we'll hear a little bit more about that from some of our speakers in the way that they've innovated a little bit later on. And then finally, and probably important to all of us at this moment in time, is this idea of long-term activation, and a key word there was resilience. So these individuals kept going. They wanted to ensure they had a very strong sense of purpose, very strong sense of what they wanted to achieve. And therefore, that came out then in the way that they managed their business and their organisation. So you're probably thinking, well, what's this got to do with the university and the students therein? Well, maybe I could just take a minute to describe that. Next slide, please. So our students and staff are our best assets. They are the individuals that give back to the community in a variety of different ways. So, for example, we have over 18,000 volunteering hours from our students that our students have put back into the community. But how might we relate that then to where I started, which were the 3 interconnecting circles? Well, arguably our students, and there's some great pictures of them there, are part of that available leadership talent. They are the sustainability pioneers of the future, and could, and probably my view is should, be engaged to drive forward that transformation. So how do we do that? How do we engage our students with you? How do we become the connectors to facilitate our students becoming those individuals? They will be made up of, that student body will be made up of born believers. There will be individuals in there. We know that these students have a very strong sense of purpose and a strong sense of responsibility to the environment. There will be born believers amongst them, and we need to foster those, as well as the committed and possibly even the yet to be awoken. They may not have had that opportunity to see those things yet, may not have had the opportunity to travel. But I'd like to think that together we could foster those and develop those sustainable mindset and those attributes that I've just described through a very strong shared sense of purpose with our stakeholders, of which you are all part of that. Next slide, please. So what does that shared sense of purpose look like? What could it look like? And these are just some suggestions. These are some of the things that we already undertake with our students and form part of our strategy moving forward. As I briefly mentioned at the very start of this presentation, the university is a new citizen student strategy, which we'll be growing into. And as part of that, and it clearly highlights the key importance of purposeful activity. That's one of the very strong emphasis within that strategy is purposeful education. And how might we engage more meaningfully with you as our stakeholders? And here are some of the ways. We have a number of business support programs, and I'll talk a little bit more about that on my next slide, which enable us to and this club is part of that, which very much enable us to widen our network. There's lots of opportunities for your organisation to get involved with our students and to mutually benefit from that association. Ultimately, our students could be your workforce for the future. So if you know and understand what that workforce is likely to be, then please talk to us about how we can best support you to facilitate these leadership competencies to sustain your business into the next millennium, hopefully. Next slide, please. So here are some of the absolute immediate opportunities. The accelerate problems, and it would be remiss of me not to highlight some of these activities that we're currently involved in, all of which you can search for online, and I'm sure Louise may well put some of the links into the chat for us. But Accelerate is a program for Cheshire and Warrington, which is about reskilling and upskilling individuals, and there's 40% funding available if you live or work in the Cheshire and Warrington area. Lots of opportunity there at 40% funded. The Business Growth Programme supports businesses with less than 250 employees. Now, there are some eligibility, easy for me to say, criteria. However, if you are eligible, then there's a diagnostic and at least 12 hours support, which is all part of the program, which is free. And I've put there the next boot camp, the The dates are in April and May of this year, so please sign up to that if you're interested in getting involved in some of the work that the university undertakes. So just to summarise, if I could have my final slide, please. We're back where we started. We're back to the 3 circles and the interconnected arrows, and hopefully through the last 20 minutes or so, I've articulated not just how we might connect in transactional terms, but also why we might connect, and the importance of this idea of sustainability and creating the sustainable pioneers of the future, creating an industry that is sustainable, but also a workforce that is sustainable, that has a shared purpose-driven belief that is not divorced from those wider societal and environment contexts in which it operates. So thank you very much for listening. More than happy to take questions now or a little bit later on. Thank you very much.
That's great. Many thanks, Kirsty. Certainly given us some food for thought there. We have had a couple of questions. We're running pretty much to time, so I think we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 questions to make sure that we don't fall behind. So we've got an interesting question here from one of our students. Well, I'm assuming it's one of our students, but asking, how can I support sustainable projects at the university? Is that something you can address, Kirsty? Are you aware of some of our projects?
I am aware of some of the projects. I think the best way for students is to get involved in volunteering. So through volunteering, through Student Futures, students are able to volunteer for those types of projects. And if that's what drives you, if that's what you're passionate about, then that's what we can connect you with through that process. And at the same time, you can work towards the Chester Difference Award. So there's kind of a double whammy benefit for students to do that.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Kirsty. And just one more here from business asking, do you know of any resources that I could access to help discover how carbon neutral my business is?
Now that is a good question, and I don't know the answer to that, but we could find out. Yeah.
Okay. So what we could maybe do then is, if that person maybe wants to send a private message with their details, we can then follow that up with you and signpost you to the relevant resources. Great. Okay. Right. Well, I don't want to let us get behind. So thanks again very much, Kirsty.
You're welcome.
And we'll be moving on now to our next speaker. I'm really thrilled that we're able to be joined today by Tim Boot of Protein Rebel, who we have had the pleasure of working with at the university through various programmes and opportunities, which I'm sure Tim will probably reference. So without further ado, I will now hand over to Tim to talk about sustainability in a small food business. Welcome, Tim.
Hello, Louise. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. As Louise said, my name is Tim, and I founded Protein Rebel about 5 months ago. I'm just going to talk to you a bit about what we're doing as a small business around sustainability. And actually our product, our core product, are protein powders, and that's for the sports, nutrition and wellness market. But what makes us different is our belief that we can make high quality protein powders that are natural, nutritious and sustainable. And to do that, we actually use new types of proteins, but I'll tell you more about that later on in the presentation. I'm going to share some of our practical experiences of running a startup that has sustainability at its heart, and why I believe this is really a massive trend here to stay. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to start off by saying that there is a massive appetite amongst consumers for change. So there's been a recent UN survey. They surveyed 1.2 million people across the world, and 2/3 of those respondents said that the world actually is facing a global climate emergency. So it really does resonate with people across the world, whatever market you're in. And the UK and Italy actually had the highest proportion of population that felt this way. There really was only a few percentage differences when you look at different genders and when you look at ages. So really it is very universal, this feeling that something needs to be done. So that means regardless of your product or your service, even your price points or your route to market, consumers want to know about sustainability and what you're doing as a business. And that will factor into their buying decisions. And indeed, Amazon, which I'm sure everyone knows about, Amazon have set up a sustainability initiative and are prioritising separately in a shop area on Amazon businesses that are focused on sustainability. So that's really good news. But when we actually start talking about sustainability to consumers, and specifically what good looks like, there's no real wide understanding of the definitions out there. There's a lot of misinformation, and some of the best intentions can end up turning into kind of greenwash. So let me just show you 3 actions that we've taken to support our goal of reducing the impact on the planet. Next slide, please. So first of all, it's the ingredients that we use. So unlike 80% of the market, we don't use whey powder. In fact, we've got a couple of variants that are plant only, but we also have one that uses cricket powder. So why do we use cricket powder? Is it just a gimmick? Well, absolutely not. It's here to stay. So firstly, they are a superfood, so they're really nutritionally dense, and they're more easily absorbed than plant proteins, which is really good news if you're trying to get that extra minute out of your time. So they have twice as much protein as beef or salmon, for example, more iron than spinach, 5 times the antioxidant levels of oranges, loaded with prebiotics, high in vitamin B12, magnesium, zinc, manganese. In fact, you could really say these insects have been built for athletes. Secondly, they're actually very sustainable. So compared to traditional protein sources, they require less of everything. So less land, less feed, less water, and they produce significantly less greenhouse gases as well. They can be farmed in multi-level farms, which means actually they take up less land than plants. So as we're thinking about a global population that's becoming larger and larger, we need to think about where our food is and how that is farmed. And crickets are really well set up to play a significant part in that. We've also made the choice of using UK farmed crickets. So that reduces the carbon footprint even further compared to crickets which are farmed in Asia, which is normally where you would buy them. Next slide, please. The second thing we've done is we kind of put our money where our mouth is, really. So for each tub that's sold, we save a square metre of threatened habitat through our partners, the World Land Trust. There's absolutely a current trend where brands and companies are planting trees, and that's really good news, but actually that pales in comparison to the benefits of saving established habitat that's high in biodiversity. So working with the World Land Trust is really important in mitigating some of the impacts that we're having as a population and as a business. In fact, I've been reading David Attenborough's latest book, and he was stating in there that when he was born, okay, granted it was 94 years ago, when he was born, 60% was still classified as wild, whereas now it's only 25% of the world that's classified as wild. There's not much more for it to go until it's all disappeared. So if we want to do something about the climate emergency that consumers have identified as being one of their key issues, we need to save every last piece of high biodiversity land that we can, and we're part of that. So next slide, please. So the third thing that we've done is looking at our packaging choices. Now, we've actually made some really difficult packaging choices because we did a poll on social media with this exact photo, asking people what they thought was more environmentally friendly. Was it the compostable pouch or was it the actual plastic tub? And 80% of respondents said it was the compostable pouch. And you can absolutely understand why people might choose that. It's home compost certified, it's not plastic, and it looks kind of modern as well. So it really does appeal and ticks lots of boxes there. But actually, when you start getting into the detail of it, you might come to a different conclusion. So if I told you that only 3% of households in the UK have a home compost, and that means you need to turn your compost and manage it correctly if you're going to put home compostable pouches in it, then you might start to take a different view. If you put that pouch in a recycling bin, it will contaminate everything that's in there. So you actually need to put it in your black bin, and which will then go to landfill along with everything else that is in your black bin. So the home compostable certification does not normally cover the little zipper that goes across the top, the little plastic zipper to seal it. It doesn't cover the inks that are printed on the pack. So even if you are one of the 3% with the home compost and you manage it correctly, you'll still be left with residue at the end of the composting period. So the other issue with it is actually it's less of a barrier than a plastic tub. So that means that your food doesn't last as long. Now, I'm sure we're all aware around issues around food waste. So if your food is not kept in a secure, airtight environment, then you're going to have some issues which could lead to further food waste. So that actually all led into our view that actually the plastic tub, which is made from high quality plastic, so that's HDPE, it can be easily recycled in your grey bin. We actually use 30% of post consumer material is put in there. It's easy to unscrew and rescrew, so you can open it and close it as many times as you want. It's a really good barrier for food, so we have a long life in there. We've also worked on having vegan inks, so they're fully biodegradable, and even the printed wrapper that goes around it has 30% post-consumer material in there. So for us, that actually makes the plastic tub that we've got, and not all plastic tubs are made from HDPE, the most sustainable option. Next slide, please. So just kind of looking at the future and why we think sustainability is important. Well, first things to say is actually it's really complex. Trying to do the right thing isn't always clear, either from a consumer point of view or from a business point of view. But I'm sure small businesses can make a difference. As Kirsty was saying, you know, purpose-driven organisations really resonate with consumers. We know the consumer demand is out there, and governments are starting to set targets now to help guide business. What we need to take it to the next level is really more clarity and more structure to then be able to know that we're making the right decisions as a small business. Next slide, please. So we're a small business. We've just been going for 5 months, as I said. So I just want to give you an opportunity as well. If you're curious about what crickets might taste like and our new sustainable protein powders, we're offering this audience a chance to purchase from our website, proteinrebel.com, and get 20% off with the code Chester20. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you ever so much, Tim. And quite, well, excuse the pun, but definitely some food for thought there. I found that particularly interesting about the container bit, because I would have automatically assumed, as I think many people did on the poll, about the compostable bag. So some really interesting points there. We've had quite a few questions in for you, Tim. So right. And you're running perfectly to time, so we've got an opportunity to fill some questions to you. First one that came in said, do you think that the trend of sustainability through biodiversity can be a successful way forward for the food and drink industry as a whole? Yes,
I absolutely do. I believe it's something that all organisations will have to come and tackle sooner or later. And if you're at the forefront of that, I think that will set you up as be a real advantage for you from a consumer point of view. So from a commercial point of view, sorry. Yeah. So we might as well get used to it. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Another one here said, you mentioned high protein. So how does that compare to other protein sources?
So for example, crickets, if you're talking specifically about crickets, crickets normally have about 70% protein content, and beef is about 30%, along with salmon.
Right, okay. There's a question here as well from a student saying that they're looking to start their own food business. Do you have any advice on how to weave sustainability into their business model from the beginning?
Yeah. I think you just have to be really passionate out there. There's not a lot of help. You have to find the answers yourself. There's not kind of organisations and schemes that you can sign up to right now. There are for larger organisations, but you have to be really interested and believe that it's going to make a difference. So yeah, do your research, crack on with it and get going.
Okay, questions are flying in here for you, Tim. Somebody said, asked the question, it's an interesting one. Did your poll have any insights into how much extra different demographics are prepared to pay to support sustainability?
If you're talking about the UN one that was done with 1.2 million people across the world, no, it didn't. Okay. But I suspect, like other polls that I've seen, it will say that consumers aren't prepared to pay more. So that's the real thing. But what it does do, it gives you a point of difference. So when consumers are looking to compare, in our case, similar protein powders, it will be in their consideration whether they are sustainable or not and what their credentials are. So hopefully we will win out there.
Yeah, and hopefully that's also a balance that will start to tip, I think, because as it starts to become part of people's conscious in terms of understanding the importance of sustainability, then, you know, hopefully they'll be prepared to sort of pay for that, hopefully going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the news agenda this year is really going to change. You know, hopefully we're out of lockdown. Hopefully Brexit's done. And so the next big thing will be the UN climate conference in Glasgow in October, and the news agenda will be focused on that. So I suspect this summer will be focused on sustainability, nature, naturalness, and you know what we can do as individuals. Yeah,
absolutely. An interesting question here, Tim. Somebody's asked, what are the crickets fed? And they've asked, is it organic?
Yes, it is. It's certified organic feed. It's plants, and it's a diet designed to give them the right nutritional profile for our products. Right,
excellent. Another interesting question that's come here, and then I think we'll wrap up on the questions for the moment. Somebody said, interesting here, aside from ingredients and packaging, what are your other sustainability challenges, maybe around production?
Yeah, absolutely. Production's always a challenge. you know, it's fairly easy to buy, for example, electricity that's from renewable sources. But actually, when you then start looking at machinery, that becomes a whole lot, another level. And really, you're talking about very complex, detailed analysis to decide whether your machines are sustainable or not. You know, how much metal are they using? What other resources are they using? All that sort of stuff. So it's a level of complexity we haven't been able to get into.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Okay, well, thanks again so much for your time, Tim. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you join us, and hopefully you'll get some good web hits. I will put an announcement out as well about the special offer code, so that I'm sure that will go down very well today. So many thanks again. Right, so we're now moving on to our next speaker. I'm delighted to introduce Jane Hennessy, who's the Development Manager at Peel NRE. And Jane's going to be talking to us this morning about Peel NRE and an update on the Protos product. So without further ado, welcome, Jane.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me? Okay, yeah.
Yes, we can, thank you.
I'm Jane Hennessy and I'm Development Manager at Peel NRE. So that was formerly Peel Environmental. And next slide, please. So Peel NRE is part of Peel L&P, which is probably best known for Media City and the Trafford Centre, Wirral Waters, Liverpool Waters. But Protos is a flagship scheme for Peel L&P. So Peel NRE, formerly Environmental, takes in the energy business, which builds wind farms, solar, EV charging, heat networks, and the muck and the minerals, and also obviously Protos and energy parks. So we work in partnership with investors, and we can do as little or as much as they would want in regard to developing out a plot. We can give as much assistance from a simple plot sale to actually taking them through planning or actually building the project out for them, whatever's required. As a company and in regards to sustainability, we're continually looking to improve, and that is not in regard to any pressures that are applied on us. That's just as a company generally in regard to our offices and in regard to the communities that we work in. So one of our mantras is positively impacting on people's lives. So the communities that we build in and we operate in, we want to make a difference in those communities. Next slide, please. So as I said before, many companies, and as Tim said, are coming under more and more pressure. So the likes of Ribena and Coca-Cola, they are coming under pressure to have so much recyclate within their product. But when the consumer goes into the supermarket, they don't want to pay any more for it, and they don't want it to look any different. So that is a massive challenge. And a lot of companies like Unilever and Coca-Cola have signed up to, we will do this by a certain year, and they're figuring out how they do that now. Also Boris's 10-point plan, which is affecting a lot of companies, and the Chancellor's announcement on mandatory reporting for climate change. Next slide, please. So Protos is a flagship scheme for Peel NRE and Peel L&P, and it's a strategic cluster of energy generation and energy users. So the model is based on putting, co-locating energy generation next to large energy use. So linking back into the sustainability element of it, this, where we are now, is the industrial heartland of Cheshire and the Northwest. So it's all about energy and getting a better energy deal for those industry users and keeping them in the area, and also attracting large industry into the area. So sustainable energy generation, sustainable employment, because a lot of those jobs are high paid 30-year jobs, sustaining industry and keeping it here, which again sustains the university in regard to bringing those graduates forward. So we have taken a graduate from University of Chester, Michael, who is working with us on all the hydrogen and carbon capture and utilisation and storage. Next slide, please. So that just gives an idea of where we are. So the University of Chester's Thornton Science Park is the yellow area, and then Protos is the pink area. The green area we've also brought into Protos in September, and the orange is the wind farm. So you can see there's a lot of industry around. So you've got SR to the top left, and you've got CF fertilizers, and then Circ Glass in the middle. They all use a lot of energy. Next slide, please. So this is just an overview, an emphasis on how much energy is being used in the area and how important energy is, and the effort to decarbonise. Next slide, please. So this is just, again, an overview of how everyone in the area is working together in regard to Net Zero Northwest, Northwest Hydrogen Alliance, HyNet, carbon capture, utilisation and storage. So it's sustainability is on a number of levels in regard to what you do yourself, and then these huge employers and industry and how they decarbonise and stay. So it's a bit evolve or die. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And that's just some of the companies that are involved. So we're part of the Cheshire Energy Hub and the Energy Innovation District. So there is the opportunity for graduates to be employed via the Cheshire Energy Hub, to be employed by those companies. But as I said before, we have chosen to take in a graduate full time. Next slide, please. So as an overview of Protos, phase 1 was delivered in December 2016. So that delivered around £170 million worth of investment. That included a new road, new private road. Adjacent is the 50 megawatt Frodsham wind farm. There is a 22 megawatt biomass facility which exports direct to the grid, so goes out. There's a materials management plot which takes in soils under the CLARE protocol, so soils that might have, or materials and aggregate that might have gone to landfill. We have a screening process where we clean them and they can be reused to build the development platforms on site or to build the roads. So rather than quarrying new aggregate, we're using recycled aggregates. The phase 2 infrastructure works, which is the new roads to open up the rest of Protos, commenced in January. And we've also about to submit the plastic park concept, which I'll come on to for planning shortly. Next slide, please. So again, this is just an overview of what is happening on Protos. So plot 4 is Progressive Energy. They got planning permission in November 2019. That is to make a bio-SNG. So it was initially sponsored by Department for Transport to take diesel off the road. Plot 8 is Cavanta's Energy from Waste. So they've started construction now. So that will take basically bin bags, which the stuff that can't be recycled will go to make energy, and that will be either used on a local grid, which I'll come on to shortly, or can be exported. So you might actually use that in your homes. Plot 9A is the biomass, which takes wood that would have gone to landfill and turns it into energy. It produces around 22 megawatts of power. We're constructing at the moment 2 new substations because there is no power left in the area or export for generators. So that will allow 124 megawatts of export and 57 megawatts of import. So if a large user of energy needed to come here, they could potentially come to Protos and they could get their energy from one of the generators. Plot 13, which links into what Tim was saying, is PET recycling. So that is all your Coke and your Sprite bottles, and that will go back into food grade PET. So someone like Nestle or Coca-Cola will buy that back from that operator. Plot 10B is all the plastics that cannot be recycled, and that will turn plastic into either electricity or hydrogen. Plot 3 is timber recycling, which does provide the timber to the biomass, and plot 2 is the materials management, which is where soils and aggregates are brought in and cleaned up. Next slide, please. So also as part of phase 1, there was 50 hectares of purpose-built habitat. We have a long-term management plan with Cheshire Wildlife Trust, who manage it on our behalf to make sure that everything is right in regard to the conditions for water voles and the plants and the ecology. Last summer there was a community event with local schools where the school children named the meadows and they were open to the public. And we also have a community benefit fund whereby local community groups can apply. So some of those have been the Bell Ringing Society. There's been new stuff for Healthby Tennis Club. There's been a play area for one of the local schools. There's been roof repairs to the local church hall. So it is sustainable in that the community is benefiting from what's there as well. Next slide, please. So I mentioned before that there is a new grid being put in. So that will facilitate a local grid whereby users can get their energy from the generator next door and hopefully get a cheaper price, whereby the generator will get a better price. There's £12 million of investment in infrastructure, so that's the new roads that are going in at the moment. And we're also looking at a network for carbon capture. So the likes of plot 10B, plastic to hydrogen, or the energy from waste, that network for when HyNet happens, and HyNet will go down that arc of the road to see fertilizers. Next slide, please. So also as part of Protos, it is evolving, and we did have an area of R&D and offices which were located around the roundabout. But obviously, because of the synergies that we have with the University of Chester and Thornton Science Park, we don't need an R&D facility or offices. We have our office here, and we work together in regard to inquiries which might be not quite ready for Protos yet, but they have a great foundation to come here, have access to the R&D facilities and to the offices. And a great example of that is Powerhouse Energy, who had their demonstrator plant here at Thornton, and now we are realising that and it's being built out at Protos. Next slide, please. So this is the area that was originally R&D. The idea is to have a plastic park. So I mentioned plot 13, which is the PET recycling, which has already gone in for planning permission. Plot 10B, which is plastic to hydrogen, again, which already has planning permission. So plot 11 and plot 12 would be a MRF and a PERF, so that's a mixed recycling facility and plastic recycling facility. They would take in waste plastics and recyclates, and they would distribute those plastics to the different occupiers on site. So Tim's containers could come here, and then they might go on to a processor on site who wants that particular type of plastic. Next slide, please. So that's just an example of how much tons of plastic are available. We had a study carried out when we were considering the plastic park, and how much is available within a 2-hour drive time of Protos. So that just gives you an idea of how much is available in the area and it is currently not being recycled. Next slide, please. So this is just an overview of the plastic to hydrogen facility, what it will look like as a CGI and how much waste it will take in. And then the hydrogen that is produced could be used to fuel the refuse trucks that bring it in. So again, it's all circular and sustainable. Next slide, please. This is progressive energy, which is the bio-SNG, which is to take diesel off the roads. So that would use either biomass or refuse to drive fuel, and that would turn that into a gas, which the HGVs could operate on. That would go into the gas system. Next slide, please. So what I was trying to say overall is that sustainability works on a number of levels, and by embedding in the communities and working with your neighbours, and as we are as part of Cheshire Energy Hub and Net Zero Northwest, then hopefully you create sustainable environments, sustainable energy, sustainable jobs, and sustainable education, and it will all eventually come together. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks ever so much, Jane. Fascinating to see how far Protos has come, especially I remember joining the university in 2016 and having the first tour as the land was getting developed. So yeah, amazing to see what has happened in a relatively short space of time. Jane, with no surprise, we've had quite a few questions in for you, so I'll do my best to get through some before we move on to our next speaker. Somebody's asked, okay, we'll start from the bit earlier up, saying, has your connection with the university benefited your research into hydrogen, for example?
Yes, because Professor Joe is all things hydrogen, and that's a great thing to have. Yeah, I think it really has, and also having the energy demonstrator here, and then they have taken a PhD student, I'm a student, so yeah, yes, definitely.
Great stuff. Somebody's actually asked an interesting question here, saying, how do you as PID ensure or maintain your supply chain to be sustainable?
So we have a sustainability director, so Joe looks at all things in regard to how our offices are operated. And I can't remember what the kite mark is that we've achieved last year, but she's managed to achieve that. So from a ground level up, you know, to recycling things that we have in the offices, the energy bulbs that we've changed to, even down to like the pens that we use and things like that. We are getting pushed on things like that. We've all been given peel water bottles rather than, you know, things like that. And they are looking at the bigger picture in regard to the buildings that we operate, the offices that we operate, the retail parks that we operate, and then right the way through into PLNRE, which looks at EV charging. So we're looking at rolling out EV charging at our, you know, media city and places like that. The heat networks project, which my colleague John is working on, so that is looking at supplying all the heat to the new apartments that are next to the Titanic Hotel. So on the Titanic Hotel, so it's on so many levels. It's on a lot of levels.
Yeah, great stuff. Somebody's here has asked, as you've mentioned that you've been working with businesses at the university, are there any opportunities at Protos for other companies to work alongside you and the university on sustainable projects?
We are always open to speak to people and how that will fit in, and I would say nothing is too wacky, really.
Okay, so maybe what I could do then is put something in the announcement, Jane, in terms of where people might be best placed to direct any inquiries to. Yeah. Okay, we can do that.
Protos website, and you can put your inquiries through there as well.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, well, the Protos website link is in the chat, everybody, so you can direct any queries there. Somebody's also asked, would the facility be able to process plastic from Tetra Pak, SIG, LO Pack type packages?
So it depends which one there is, because there's different types of processes. So you've got PET.
Right.
If nobody was taking those Tetra Packs, for example, then it would probably say the plastic recycling facility, it could go to Powerhouse to plot 10B. However, we've also had inquiries from parties that do cat food pouches and things like that, and they take the different parts, they take the plastic out and they process that, and they take the aluminium out and they process that. So we haven't had an inquiry in regard to that yet, so I would say no, but then we don't know what we would get tomorrow. So yes, it's not an impossibility.
Okay, I'm conscious of time, and we do have a few more questions, so we can always either try to address those at the end, or I will follow up with people and we can use the chat and, as I say, in the post-event follow-up. But just one last one, which hopefully will be a quick answer for you, Jane. One of our students has asked, do you currently offer any placements or opportunities for engagement with students?
I would say in the first instance via the Cheshire Energy Hub will probably be the best point. And then it should hopefully come to us all who best suits, because there's a lot of companies there, and it would depend what they were studying as well, and how to progress forward. So
okay, I'll make sure to put a link into the Cheshire Energy Hub as well. Okay, well, that's great. Many thanks again for your time, Jane. It's been lovely to see you, albeit virtually. And as I say, I'll follow up on the other questions in the post-event feedback and put the relevant links into the chat. Right, so now we're moving on to our next speaker, who's already been mentioned as Professor Hydrogen. So I'm delighted to introduce my close colleague, Professor Joe Howe, who is the Executive Director of Thornton Research Energy Institute, as well as chair of the Northwest Hydrogen Alliance, as well as various other official posts. So without further ado, I will hand over to Joe. Welcome, Joe. Good morning.
Good morning, Louise. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you for that kind introduction. I'm delighted to be here as well, talking to you about some of the work that we're doing at the University of Chester. And in many ways, what I want to argue with you this morning, colleagues, is that we're actually right at the forefront of this really important agenda around industrial decarbonisation. And I want to talk to you about a number of different projects that we're involved with. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about how potentially you could support us on that journey, or we could support you on that journey, because this is an absolutely critical dimension to delivering on our net zero obligations. So in front of you on this particular slide are a number of documents that have been published over the last couple of years, particularly on the left-hand side of the slide potentially, but then more importantly, I want to argue that the whole net zero agenda around industrial decarbonisation is actually accelerating fairly quickly at the moment. So on this slide, top left-hand side, you've got the industrial strategy, which was published a couple of years ago, outlining what the key areas that the government wanted to focus on, one of which was clean growth. And if you go down just to the right-hand side of the industrial strategy, you'll see the clean growth strategy. In there, that articulated the government's commitment to sustainability, to sustainable development, and to clean industrial development. In there, it outlined a number of different projects. One was to do with battery storage, energy storage. One was to do with local energy systems, and within the Northwest, I don't know if it's been mentioned yet, Louise, but we have a fabulous project in Cheshire called ePort, which is looking at intelligent energy systems around our particular locality. And then another element within this particular clean growth strategy was around industrial decarbonisation. And the industrial decarbonisation aspect got articulated in what's just to the left of there, the industrial clusters mission. That was published about 18 months ago, and in there it talked about a number of big emitting clusters around the UK and what the plans were from the government to try and deliver on net zero industrial clusters by 2025, 2030, 2035, sequencing those particular aspects in terms of decarbonising the industry around here. You can also see on here, colleagues, the Climate Change Act, which was amended last year, committing the UK to net zero, committing the UK to net zero by 2050. That's 29 years away. So we have to really accelerate on this particular agenda. And something, Louise, you know, I'm passionate about this, making sure that Cheshire is absolutely right up there in terms of trying to be one of the first areas to reach net zero. A number of local authorities have already committed to that, not least Cheshire West and Chester, in terms of the climate emergency commitments, etc. Over the last couple of months, I think this whole agenda has really become accelerated. Back in December, we saw the publication of the 10-point Green Action Plan that the government published, detailing 10 different areas in which it wants to focus on. We've seen the publication of the Rio Settlement Agreement, which talks about pricing arrangements and sustainability around gas and electricity supplies for the next 5 years within the UK. We've seen the publication of the 6th carbon budget, which is now setting quite stringent carbon emission reductions by about 2035, 2040, which will be about 70% carbon emission reductions on 1990 levels. We've seen the publication of the construction playbook, which tells us now that business have to procure services in a sustainable manner. We've seen the publication of the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund, which are opportunities for business to actually get funding by working with different bodies to look at sustainable energy systems within their own particular companies and businesses. And then finally, just a couple of weeks ago, or a few weeks ago, we saw this publication of Skills for Jobs, the 16+ education reform white paper, which I think is just an amazing opportunity for us, Louise, to be working interchangeably with industry on a topic area that the 16+ age groups are absolutely passionate about. But also something, Louise, in relation to potentially people who have had challenging times during the pandemic, are looking to refocus their careers. They realise that health, sustainability and inclusion are really important areas, and this might be an opportunity for them to retrain, to retain people within the workplace and within issues of sustainability. Next slide. So colleagues, where do I work? You can see on this particular slide, right in the heart of our industrial cluster, Thornton Science Park. That's where I'm based. That's the University of Chester's campus, right in the heart of this particular industrial cluster. It is one of 6 industrial clusters. So if you look to the right-hand side, you can see the key industrial clusters that government has identified. Up in Scotland, you've got Grangemouth. Coming down the east coast, you've got Teesside, Humberside, down to Southampton, South Wales, and then up to us in the Mersey region, particularly on the North Cheshire south side of the estuary, which is the left-hand side slide. This has been taken from Peel, actually. Peel pulled this together, Louise, and I'm sure Jane was very much involved in this. And these are the companies that surround us. On the left-hand side, you've got Urenco, the largest uranium enrichment facility in the UK. My colleague, Professor John Council, is working on a key project looking at energy reduction mechanisms, energy management systems for that particular plant. Going across, you come to Stanlow Oil Refinery. That's the 2nd largest oil refinery in the UK, currently leading on issues around carbon capture and looking at the development of biofuel, bioaviation fuel, hydrogen production facilities on that site. Going further right, you come to Protos, which Jane's already talked about. But close to that site, you have CF Fertilisers, the largest producer of ammonia-based fertilisers in the UK. In essence, colleagues, the product that they produce, put on the land, it enables us to get fed. It enhances the amount of agricultural production in the area. Going further to the right hand side or further to the east here, you come to the INEOS plant over at Rock Savage. I think that's the 5th or 6th largest combined gas cycle power station in the UK. And then you've got INEOS Chlor, that produces all of the chemicals that actually purifies our water. So you've drunk any water this morning, if you've had a cup of coffee and you've used tap water, that has all been purified from that particular site. But to do all of this takes a lot of energy. And as you can see, the total amount of energy used in our particular locality is 5% of UK's energy use. We're absolutely high on the profile of government's agenda to look at this area and to ask some very constructive questions and supportive questions about how we can deliver on the industrial decarbonisation agenda. So what are we doing? Well, under the Industrial Clusters Mission, you can read the slide there, there are 3 different components that the government is proposing to fund. Firstly, there is a big research centre which is going to pull together all of the knowledge from around the UK to inform businesses and to inform developments around industrial decarbonisation. Secondly, there are some industrial roadmaps or cluster plans about how to decarbonise over the next 20-30 years of those particular 6 clusters that I've identified on this map or are identified on this map. And then thirdly, colleagues, there's propositions around deployment projects to look specifically at the key industrial areas, the key industrial infrastructure, such as what's detailed on the left-hand side of this particular slide. Next slide, please, Louise. So the first one of those that I've mentioned is the UK Industrial Decarbonisation Research and Innovation Centre. This currently is with government to see whether or not funding can be produced. It's had a phase 1 set of funding to look at what its scope might be and the most effective way in which it can deliver on research and innovation for the 6 industrial clusters. It's being led by Professor Mercedes Moretto-Belair from Heriot-Watt University. And at the University of Chester, we're involved in 2 different components, 2 different elements of it's successfully funded that Kirsty Simpson and I will be leading on. Firstly, we will be producing and delivering on a national workforce plan, national workforce planning for industrial decarbonisation in the UK. What does that mean? I can hear you asking yourselves, what is a national workforce plan? Well, in essence, we will be taking what information we get from the various industrial clusters about their propositions, and we will be assessing the skills requirements to deliver on those particular propositions. What are the skills, what are the supply chain requirements that are required to deliver on those particular propositions? And then from that, we can begin to consider, well, do we have those skills provisions in the UK, or what do we need to provide from universities or from colleges or from other learning providers to deliver the skills requirements to deliver on this, to ensure that supply chain and businesses have those skills in place to deliver on net zero by 2040, 2050. And secondly, the University of Chester is the Northwest academic lead on this particular project. So one of our jobs will be to choreograph the different universities from the Northwest, Manchester, Liverpool, LJMU, MMU, Lancaster, etc., and how they sort of filter into IDRIC and how they can draw down the different knowledges that are emerging from IDRIC. Next slide, please. So colleagues, I mentioned the second aspect of the industrial decarbonisation challenge, and that's this net zero Northwest cluster plan. We've had some funding from that already, and it's been considering what is the roadmap, what's the route map, what's the cluster plan between now and 2050. And as you can see from this slide, it brings together some of the largest companies from the Cheshire and Warrington area, from the Northwest, in fact. And I'm delighted that we're the university partner of choice when it comes to working with these particular industries and these particular bodies. around this particular cluster plan. And Kirsty and I are working very closely with all of these bodies around this. Next slide, please. And on this slide, you'll see what we've been doing to date. We've been looking at the different geographies around the Northwest on industrial decarbonisation, the key installations, the key localities in terms of where industry is based. We've then been looking at the emissions from the emissions EU emissions trading scheme, looking at where the key emissions are across the Northwest. And you can see the emissions intensity, Louise, how it really focuses in and around the Cheshire and Warrington and South Liverpool area. We've then been breaking that down into specific subsectors to understand those emissions. And then the great thing is we've started to consider what the opportunities are, to decarbonise those areas. And Kirsty and I are now leading on beginning to consider, well, what technologies do we need to put in place to realise those opportunities? And perhaps more importantly, what are the skills that are required and what are the supply chain requirements to deliver and realise on those particular opportunities? And I'm really pleased that we're doing this, because then we can cascade that information into the businesses on the call today, and we can also cascade that into different learning providers across the Northwest to ensure that we're perfectly provisioned to realise the opportunity here. Next slide, please. And then the third dimension that I talked about, the industrial decarbonisation challenge, is the deployment propositions for the key industrial clusters. And we currently have a proposal in with government around a deployment proposition for the Northwest, for the cluster that I've talked about. And colleagues on the call, a number of them may well have seen this particular model that's on the right-hand side of this slide. It's the HyNet Northwest proposition around decarbonisation, around hydrogen production, around carbon storage, around carbon utilisation as well. This particular slide talks about us having some hydrogen production facilities, major hydrogen production facilities in the Northwest. The only thing that's emitted from hydrogen, colleagues, is water. There's no CO2, there's only water that comes out from hydrogen when you utilise it. It talks about fuel switching on there, supporting industries with hydrogen to shift away from hydrocarbon fuels, which emit carbon dioxide, towards hydrogen, which only emits water. It talks about carbon capture, utilisation and storage. The largest carbon capture, utilisation storage project currently funded by governments in the UK is in Cheshire. It's at Northwich at Tata Chemicals, where they're capturing the carbon from their salt works, and then they're beginning to utilise that carbon by mixing it with sodium, so that people of an age like me can take sodium bicarbonate to keep their hearts calmed down when we do presentations on internet to hundreds of people, Louise. The next thing is heating. That's the utilisation of hydrogen rather than methane, which emits carbon dioxide, which is what we use at the moment in our central heating systems. The utilisation of hydrogen in our heating systems or in our energy systems within our homes and within our industries. And there's some very good propositions beginning to emerge, particularly from Cadent, that you might hear about in a little while around the distribution of hydrogen to provide that heating system, that hydrogen blended heating system. The next proposition is transport. On this particular slide, Louise, you can see a train, a hydrogen train, Alstom train. Alstom's located over in Widnes, and they've got propositions around developing and building the hydrogen breeze within the UK. And I think that within 10 years we'll see hydrogen trains running around the north of England as they replace the old diesel fuel stock, which of course emits carbon dioxide, to hydrogen trains, which only emits water, of course. We also have some fabulous propositions emerging from Liverpool City region and Manchester to replace the diesel fuel buses over to hydrogen buses. Next one is dispatchable power. We can take hydrogen and we can dispatch it to where we perhaps require electricity to drive power stations, such as the one at Rock Savage International, such as the one at at Fiddler's Ferry, which then provides us with electricity. So rather than using gas, which emits carbon dioxide, I keep saying that, it uses gas, hydrogen to emit water, and that's the only one. This will also enable the development of a lot of infrastructure, engineering, construction infrastructure around carbon capture plants, hydrogen facilities, pipelines, etc. And what's most important to me, and the thing that I'm most passionate about, is that it will enable the development of green skills and the provision of green skills that will be required to deliver on these particular projects, deliver skills and deliver jobs. And I'm absolutely passionate, Louise, as you know, that I want the University of Chester to be at the cutting edge in terms of delivering skills to industry, skills to the people who actually want to go into the whole green recovery agenda and realise the opportunities around the green recovery agenda as our Prime Minister and the government build back better, build back healthier and build back greener. Next slide, please. So here's the companies that are very much involved in the HyNet consortium. I won't go into these in any great depth, but you can see the ones who are working with some major primaries from Mumbai to Chicago to Milan. We're right at the heart of this within Cheshire and Warrington, Louise, and within the Northwest, and we're very proud to be involved in this particular cluster. Next slide, please. So this is my final question, colleagues. And what I want to do here is just reflect upon, well, how is the University of Chester engaging with the industrial decarbonisation agenda? I hope, colleagues, you've got some kind of insight, you've got my enthusiasm for what's going on, the different projects that we're involved with this. But colleagues, I just want to actually emphasise that the University of Chester is right at the heart of the industrial decarbonisation agenda in the UK. Physically, look at where we're located within the Northwest industrial cluster. Metaphorically, look at our position in terms of our being the academic lead on a number of the deployment on the deployment project for the Northwest. Our relationship with the IDRIC project, where we will be leading on the skills and workforce planning packages for that. So nationally, I believe that Kirsty Simpson and myself are actually absolutely seen at being right at the forefront of the skills and the workforce planning elements and components. So, you know, I'm delighted that we are the partner of choice for a whole swathe of different industries in relation to industrial decarbonisation. I'm so looking forward to taking some of the knowledges that we're building through these projects, through the work that people like John Councillor doing with Urenco, taking that science, cascading it down into our undergraduate, postgraduate curriculum, our skills outreach work and our potential future work as we go into a reformed 16+ education agenda and how we begin to interrelate with industry to ensure that industry in the area has the skills to realise the opportunities of net zero. At that point, Louise, I think I've probably waffled on enough, so I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thanks ever so much, Joe, and as always, your passion has very much come across. I must thank you again for your time and joining us this morning. I know you've had to jump in from another meeting. Unfortunately, we are running to time now, so I don't want us to get any further behind. We have had, as you would have expected, a number of questions for you, Joe, but as I've said previously, we will address those in the follow-up communications to delegates.
Louise, if they get forwarded on to me, I'd be delighted to look over them and work with you to make sure that we get those answered, those questions addressed. That's
very kind. Thank you, Joe. Right then, so moving on, and many thanks again, Joe, for your time. I'm delighted to introduce the University of Chester's Vice-Chancellor, Professor Eunice Simmons. Good morning, Vice-Chancellor.
Good morning, Louise, and good morning, everybody. It's a very great privilege to be here at this first Business Growth Project event of the year, and themed about sustainability, which is very close to my academic heart. So I've been at the university for a year now, and Joe has described some of the work we're starting to do in the sustainability space. I know you've had interesting talks this morning already from some key businesses in the area, Peel, for example, and Protein Rebel. So I want to introduce our keynote speaker to you in a moment, but just a word on what we're doing as the university to follow on from Joe. I've literally this morning come from a meeting where we've spent the bulk of it talking about how we can influence green transport planning in the different local authority areas where we work, so Chester and Warrington particularly this morning, and also thinking about our own built estate, what we can do in that space. And I did work on one of the sector's first net zero buildings a few years ago in my first key role in this space. So I think without further ado, because I keep to time, Louise, I will introduce now our next keynote speaker, Dr. Angie Needle. So Angie is Director of Strategy at Cadent, and she's focusing on the approach to delivering net zero, the energy transition, and the role that hydrogen has in the future energy mix. I know Cadent and the university are very aligned actually in this agenda for decarbonisation and sustainability. And Angie actually is a big supporter of environmental, climate change and diversity issues, and is the founder of the Women's Utility Network. This focuses actually on the careers and the development of careers of women in the utility sector. And I think hopefully we'll see some more female graduates benefiting from and engaging in the sector in the future. So Angie, we're very grateful that you've taken the time to speak to us today. Again, she can take questions afterwards, so do submit them during the talk. Without further ado, Louise, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Angie Needle. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Eunice. Can you hear me, everybody? So it's really lovely to be here, and it's such an important topic, right? Well, what we're talking about here is the future of our world. And so I'm strategy director at Cadent, and I chose this job because I genuinely felt in one of my previous roles that I wasn't doing what I was put on the planet for, which was to leave the place sort of more enhanced than when I arrived. And so when I'm going to be talking about natural gas here and the transition to hydrogen. But what I'm really talking about is how we can do our part to reduce the devastating impacts of climate change, because let's be honest, that's what this is really about. And sometimes when we talk about technologies and we're talking about the future and our jobs and our careers and whether we do what we want for a living, we forget that the goal here is to ensure we've got a habitable planet for all life, right? So we can get a bit distracted, can't we? So I'm going to talk about what Cadent is up to, and I'm also going to tell you a little bit more about hydrogen. And Joe's done a great job of teaming me up with some extra info. And I also know that time is tight and I've got lots of things to tell you, which gives you an excuse to invite me back to tell you some more at another time, because it's very unlikely we'll get through it all. So let's go on to the first slide, please. So just a little bit about Cadent and natural gas. So you might not realise today, but natural gas pretty much drives everything, okay? So 2/3 of the electricity that you use is generated from natural gas, only 1/3 is from renewables. We'd like it to be more renewables and less natural gas. We know natural gas is a fossil fuel, it's methane, which is bad, right? When you burn it, it produces carbon emissions. And today we forget, because plugging things in is exciting, that natural gas is used in so many parts of the country, so many parts and processes, industrial processes, the generation of electricity and heating your homes, that it actually is huge in terms of the amount of energy. So let me just tell you, 900 terawatt hours of gas are used in this country each year, and only 300 terawatt hours of electricity. So moving away from something that provides such a significant proportion of our energy is huge. Now, we deliver natural gas for a living, that's our job. And we do it safely day in, day out. So we're the people with the yellow pipes under the road, digging up the road, putting the new yellow pipes in their natural gas pipes. We've got a network of 131,000 kilometres of gas pipes. Cadent serves 11 million customers in the UK, and other gas networks are available, of course, but we're Cadent, so we're going to talk about us, and we provide the gas to Chester. So if we move on, because actually net zero means that we can't have any natural gas anymore. It's an existential threat to the future of Cadent, because actually if we don't have natural gas, we have nothing to put in the pipes. And that's a good thing, right? Because we're trying to get to net zero. So what do we do with the infrastructure? And do we need natural gas at all? Can't we just get rid of it? It's evil, right? So let's move on to the next slide. So the reason why we need an alternative to natural gas is that we need a place to put energy. And the reason for that is that the amount of energy that this country uses especially in the middle of winter, for heating is significant. So a huge amount more energy is transmitted in the gas pipeline than ever does in the electricity network. So you'd need an electricity network probably 5 to 10 times bigger just to cope with the amount of heat if you all decided to plug in a heater instead of having natural gas. So actually, a gas is a very efficient way of moving energy around, but we can't have natural gas anymore. So as Joe has quite rightly outlined, hydrogen is a great solution here. It's a bit of a wonder gas, if I'm honest, because not only is that top left on the periodic table that you all learnt at school and forgot, it's in lots of things, which means we have to extract it. We can't dig it out of the ground like we can with natural gas. We have to make it. And so there's a lot of ways of making hydrogen actually, but there's two key ways. You can take it out of methane and capture the CO2, which is called blue hydrogen, or you can make it from a process called electrolysis, which uses renewable electricity and therefore is zero carbon. And as Joe mentioned, when you burn hydrogen, it produces water. When you use it up, it produces water. So when you burn methane today, it produces carbon monoxide, which is why we have carbon monoxide alarms in our homes. So actually, a transition to hydrogen makes sense. Now we've got to make hydrogen, and I've already told you that we need a lot of it. So let's talk about what the country's doing about hydrogen. Next slide, please. So it's becoming a thing. A few years ago, it wasn't a thing, and it didn't need to be a thing because the country had a target to be 80% carbon emissions by 2050. And that 20% that was left over was everybody else's problem, right? The tricky bit that nobody wanted to deal with, the industrial uses of energy and hard to abate transport and heating our homes, by the way, which is a big problem I'll talk to you about in a bit. So hydrogen's becoming a thing. The Committee on Climate Change, the big authority out there on what we ought to do, is explaining quite clearly that because we now need to get to zero by 2050, there is a role for hydrogen. And hydrogen's useful, as I said before. You can store it, you can make it, you can compress it, you can put it in pipes, you can turn it into solid fuels like ammonia for transport, you can liquefy it, you can move it around places. So there's already plans globally to make lots of hydrogen in the places that have lots of wind. Oh, look, the UK, lots of solar, like sunny places, Africa, and pipe hydrogen to the demand centres because you can then use it to generate electricity, you can use it to heat your homes. So the little sort of light green lines in this chart show where hydrogen might go. So next slide, please. And the government are supportive. As here's Boris here talking about his 10-point plan. Hopefully you'll have seen that before Christmas. And this is the first time that hydrogen was really mentioned in any great way, in a sort of an official, like, it's now got a tick against it. We agree that we need it. It's a good idea. And he said quite a lot of things about hydrogen. He also said quite a lot of things about a lot of other ways of getting to net zero, by the way. So everybody got a sweetie from the sweetie jar when Boris put his 10-point plan together. We need lots of renewable power. We need the electrification of transport. We need sensible agricultural practices for emissions reductions. We need, lots of different things. So like, it was a bit scattergun, but it was very sensible in terms of the list of things to focus on. Next slide, please. And useful in the 10-point plan, some timelines were laid out, and this is what we've been working on this for quite some time. It's not just, oh look, hydrogen's a thing. So we've been working on our jigsaw piece, if you like, which is, can you put hydrogen into the gas grid? And is that okay, right? So hydrogen is a combustible gas. It burns, that's the point of it. So does methane, and we do that safely every day, 24/7. It's highly likely that you'll have had a power cut. It's much less likely that you'll have had a gas cut. So having a system that's got two energy vectors in it, if you like, electricity and gas, is very helpful. You can balance the system. So the hydrogen strategy part of the 10-point plan talks about the UK publishing a hydrogen strategy this year. Hallelujah, we need one, so that's great. talked about blending hydrogen into the gas grid by 2023. Excellent. So those of you on the call who have businesses that use natural gas today could have a blend of hydrogen that immediately takes out some carbon emissions from that natural gas. And our plan, by the way, as a gas distribution network, is to help transition the whole country to hydrogen where it is needed in the gas grid. So we are, through lots and lots of pilots and trials we're doing, we're demonstrating that it's safe to put 100% hydrogen into the gas grid. And we plan to do this through a series of pilots and trials over the next few years, culminating in a hydrogen town in the mid-20s. And that hydrogen town, by the way, needs some hydrogen to make it happen. And where is hydrogen going to be produced? In the northwest, yes. One of the places where it may well be, and it's highly likely that the hydrogen town could well be near to where you are today. So that would be super exciting. It's very much depending on lots of moving parts, so it could be other places too, and I'd like to think that we can do more than one hydrogen town, but just think about that and the excitement that will create, the challenges actually as well. Right, I know I need to push on, so next slide please. We are not alone in thinking hydrogen's a good idea, by the way. It is a global thing. There are projects all over the world, and there are countries all over the world that have now set themselves hydrogen strategies. There are trillions of dollars on the table. This is being seen as a new economy. So if you're thinking about your career and you have an interest in sustainability and an interest in the future, the green agenda is not only absolutely fascinating and continuously motivating for me personally, but there will be lots of places for you to be employed globally if you choose a career in this particular sector, whether that be hydrogen or something else actually. But the hydrogen economy is on its way up. So the estimate it's worth $2.5 trillion. That was set by the Hydrogen Council, who you would say was a little bit biased, but Goldman Sachs recently said they think it's worth 10 trillion. Now, I never thought, when I was a school kid, that I'd be talking trillions of pounds, but there you go. It's quite amusing. So next slide, please. So we need quite a lot of hydrogen. That's part of the issue, is that we're not making any. And as Joe mentioned earlier, hydrogen can be used for heavy industry that needs a flame, right? So, steel, cement, fertilizer, those kinds of industries. Heavy transport that's difficult to electrify, you can have hydrogen fuel cells, trains that Joe mentioned earlier too. Power generation, so instead of burning methane and having to capture the CO2, you burn hydrogen, and companies like Siemens and others are already looking at how you can have gas turbines that burn hydrogen and create electricity. And then don't forget, you need hydrogen for flexibility, and by flexibility I mean what happens when it's not windy and we have an electricity system that is dependent on renewable power. You need a place, and actually what happens when you don't need the electricity during the night time when everybody's asleep and nothing's switched on? You can harness that energy and make hydrogen, and you store it for when you need it. So flexibility is really important. And the last thing, which I care about deeply, is buildings. So you mostly heat your homes with natural gas today. We're going to have to come into your home and make that something different. And so you've got choice, and that could either be a heat pump, which is electrically driven, or it could be hydrogen. And a hydrogen boiler is pretty much the same as a gas boiler. So next slide, please. Just to show you some things in action. So this is at Keele University. Keele have got their own gas network. We've been making hydrogen from electrolysis and putting it 20% into the gas grid. There. Today, you can put 20% in the gas grid and it does nothing to anybody's appliances, or all gas appliances are tested to 26% hydrogen. So 20% can go in there and immediately decarbonise the gas grid. So we've been doing the pilots at Keele, and we're going to pilot it on a village soon. And got a bank of boilers there we've been testing. And then if you go to the next slide, please. We're also looking at a 100% hydrogen in people's homes. So, and this could be a business too, of course, it's just a building. It'd be nice if it was a more energy efficient building, but that aside, we have got what we've got today a little bit. So Hydrogen burns with an orange flame, not a blue flame like natural gas, so it's potentially more appealing. And there's been lots and lots of tests done on appliances that can be converted to hydrogen. And we've got Baxi and Worcester Bosch's boilers there that are hydrogen boilers, and I've actually seen those. They're all prototypes at the moment, but you could see how actually when my boiler breaks, I'll just get a hydrogen ready boiler, and it can burn methane and then hydrogen when it needs to. Next slide, please. Now, Joe's already talked about HyNet, and this is regionally so important for you. So, you know, this is one of the key industrial clusters for the UK. Going to make 3 terawatt hours of hydrogen by 2025, 30 terawatt hours by 2030. This is 80% of Boris's 10-point plan, right? So maybe he's not being quite as aspirational as he could be, but you know, if HyNet gets the go ahead, it will transform this region. You know, there'll be lots of investment here, and that is because you'll be the focus of the new hydrogen economy. I'm not going to say much more about that because I know Joe's talked about it. Next slide, please. Like, wow, I know you're all thinking, this sounds like too good to be true, right? When can I get my hands on some hydrogen, right? But very little hydrogen's made today. So let's be honest, we've got the next decade to produce hydrogen at scale and start blending it into the gas grid. So you might start having blends of hydrogen in your gas appliances. Between the 2030s and the 40s, scale will start ramping up. So we can start to convert bits of the country. So those of you who are old enough, and I know probably most of you aren't, but in the 60s and 70s, the gas grid was converted from Towns gas to natural gas, to North Sea gas. And every property and every street, and you know, every place was converted. So a similar conversion process will need to happen. And then you will mature that over the next 10 years. So that is a lot to think about. We've got to make the hydrogen, we've got to store it, we've got to make sure we can convert the existing gas network, we've got to make sure all your appliances are hydrogen ready, we've got to ensure it's safe. And in the meantime, if your house can have an electric solution, because it's efficient, it's got space for a heat pump, then it should do that too. So we're not saying this is the only answer. This is an answer for the places where it's sensible, it makes sense, and customers want it because it's easy to get your head around. I'll just get a new boiler, tick. You don't have to put a heat pump in and the disruption that creates. Next slide, please. So some things for you, I wanted to leave you with some things to think about, and I'm sure I can't see questions right now, but there may well be questions, so I'll hopefully we've got a little bit of time for that. So your region, the Northwest, has all the ingredients to lead a green economy for the UK. And yes, hydrogen has a role in that, and I've told you quite a bit about that, but it's not just about hydrogen, it's about the sustainability agenda in its entirety. You've got all the ingredients, which is amazing. You've got the potential to be an innovation hotspot, I think, because some new technologies could happen here first. And so we talk about you being a super place, in Boris's words. Let's make that happen. The skills and innovation and technology is all there. I saw a question actually from somebody who is obviously from a business who said, like, we just don't have the money to invest in these things. And we need some honesty here, because actually the decisions that people make today are based on the survival of their organisation for the next year or two. Very, very few of them have the luxury, like I do, of thinking about the survival of our business for the next 30 years. And that's where the innovation is needed. It's not just technical innovation, it's economic and policy innovation too. So it's about, you know, what kinds of mechanisms and policies and things do we need in place that will enable people to embrace whatever needs to be embraced. And I think that's really important, that we don't pigeonhole this as an engineering thing. It's not, it's a people thing. This is about winning the hearts and minds of individuals who are going to make decisions. So it requires social science as much as engineering. And then the last thing I just wanted to say is, look, you know, we know hydrogen is going to be a thing. How much of a thing is very much dependent on where the demand comes from. And so if you think that it can have a role in your organisation, whatever shape or form, get involved. You know, there's lots of opportunities to get involved all over the place. And the government are willing to spend some money on this, and we're pushing them to spend more. So I hope that's enough, and I've really enjoyed talking with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Can I just reiterate what a pleasure it's been to have you here with us this morning? And again, I appreciate, like Joe, you're sort of doing Teams tennis in between meetings, so we really do appreciate you giving us your time. We have had a number of questions, but again, I'm conscious of time, so any that we don't get to, we will try and wrap up. We had a couple of questions. I've not been able to publish them all because they're coming in thick and fast, but from students that are ultimately asking, I'm trying to sort of encapsulate, asking about sort of how to engage with Cadent in terms of sort of graduate programmes, what potential skills you're addressing in terms of skill gap. And also somebody's asked about, you may well be aware, Angie, that the university has a work-based learning module. And obviously we've been having to run that virtually, but very successfully. Yeah. So again, somebody's asked if that's potentially something. So I guess something just around about how students might look to engage with Cadent as an organisation, and particularly around the sustainability agenda.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I always have a graduate in my team, by the way. So there's a rotation. So we it's really important this, because we have to you know, impart our expertise. So we have an apprentice program at Cadent. We have a graduate program. And you know, we have cohorts every year, and we've done it this year, even though even with COVID, so our cohort haven't even met each other, which is unusual. And you know, we also fund university research, and we do that where it makes the biggest difference to us. So don't forget, Cadent, we're a monopoly, we're a gas distributor. We are spending our customers' money on this, and so we have to justify that investment. But I think ensuring that all organisations, especially the size of ours, have a really great flow of talent through the organisation. And those of you who know me know that I genuinely care about diversity too. So the other thing that I'm bothered about, as well as saving the planet, is equality for men and women. And I'm sure there's other versions of equality too, but if we can't flipping fix that one, I slightly worry about the rest. So I'm very much focusing on ensuring, both in Cadent and externally, that we can just make sure we've got some diversity. Diversity breeds innovative thinking. It's absolutely fantastic. So yes, everybody is welcome. So as and when those programs come up, the Cadent website has all the information on it.
Great, thanks very much, Angie. You touched on this point that one of the businesses actually located at one of our university sites has mentioned about the fact that obviously net zero is of course a target for SMEs, but obviously the costs and resources required for implementation can be too high. What would be your advice in terms of where might they go, where might they be signposted to sort of address that ambition to tackle net zero, but also have an honest conversation about funding potentials?
Yeah, and don't forget, it depends what kind of organisation you are. So the first thing I encourage people to do is like count the beans, like, so know where you can make a difference. And so, you know, most businesses have, you know, set yourself a sustainability goal. Organisations with a purpose tend to do better. What are you here for? And try and make your sustainability agenda part of that purpose. I think that would be really important. When it comes to buying electricity, buying gas, you know, those kinds of things, you can buy green gas today, just buy methane, you can buy green electricity contracts. That tends to reduce most of your emissions. You know, have a waste strategy, have a engagement strategy with your employees, and a fleet and transport strategy. But when it comes to investment, which is, I know I need to invest in a new, more energy efficient boiler, let's say, or heating system, or like, how do you get money for those kinds of things? And that's where businesses struggle, because often they've got what they've got, and maybe they're renting their building. And I just happen to work in the B2B sector in British Gas, where I was responsible for selling services to businesses, and ultimately it comes down to what you are willing to bear, if you like, in terms of paybacks on things. So the issue with a lot of sustainability is that the payback is long. You know, we're talking about 7 to 10 years for most energy efficient projects. Like, businesses don't know whether they're going to be here in 7 to 10 years, let alone, so that is the challenge. And you know, there are government grants and help from the Carbon Trust and the Energy Saving Trust available. But actually, honest with you, I don't think it's enough. I think the government does need to do more. I wish I had the answer. But I think these are the kinds of things we need to be telling government, you know. Yeah.
Thank you, Angie. That's great, and I know that will have addressed a number of questions that we've actually had in. And I guess lastly, this is a bit of a finger in the sky, but quite a few questions have come in saying, when do you envisage, or when are your thoughts as to when we're all going to have hydrogen boilers, and we'll have that sort of time frame of that transition? So
we're planning on, well, we're asking politely government at the moment to mandate hydrogen ready boilers. So that means if your boiler breaks in the next few years, you replace it with a hydrogen ready one, so that when hydrogen comes, your boiler's already good to go. That would be really great, because that means you know that your home is net zero ready, if that makes sense. If you buy a green electricity contract, and then you're ready for hydrogen when it comes. And we're asking for that by 2025. And that allows the boiler manufacturers and the appliance manufacturers to get their supply chain going to make hydrogen ready boilers, which they can do, but at the moment they're making them on one-offs for projects and trials. When hydrogen comes to your region is very much dependent on how much hydrogen there is, and have we saved up enough to convert a whole geography. In order to get to net zero, we've got to do the conversion over the late 30s and 40s. I don't think you'll have enough hydrogen to do it sooner, but there will be pockets where you can. So it will be done region by region, and there'll be some regions that never get hydrogen, and that's because there's a better alternative, or it will be because there's a better alternative. And so you know, we're even looking at, well, actually we might not need a gas network here and here, and we might, you know, want to encourage customers to take up electric solutions. And this is why there's a problem, actually, because we want customers to have choice, but then giving them choice adds complexity. Because if everybody wants, well, you can't have one house next door to the other going, I'll have hydrogen, I'll have a heat pump, and then you've got to pay for the gas network regardless, or the electricity network.
Okay, I'm conscious, Angie, that I know you have to leave us for another meeting. So at this point, I'll just say again, huge thanks on behalf of the university. I know the Vice-Chancellor and all colleagues with us today, and those of us joining, are delighted that you've been able to join us at this event. It's been a real honour for us. And
very welcome, thank you.
And we will be taking you up on your kind offer, I'm sure, to come back and talk to us some more about it as we progress, certainly with some key projects that we know are coming down the track. So many thanks again, Angie.
Thank you.
At this point, I'm going to be handing over to Dr. Martin Morledge, who is Head of Commercial Operations at the University of Chester, who has kindly agreed to give us our closing remarks for today's event. Many thanks, Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Louise, for that, and thank you to everybody and all of our talkers today for such an excellent range of talks and great questions posed by our audience. But I am afraid it is my duty to bring proceedings here to an end, but it's not the end of our conversation. Today's talk's given me great pleasure, because when we formed the business growth community, it was to do exactly what we've seen today, which was to bring together the key skills that we have to offer as the University of Chester and showcase these along with the local and regional business who have engaged with the university and are in our network, and make sure that that skill and knowledge comes to everybody. And I'm sure you want to join with me in to say that actually we've all learned something since just before 10 o'clock this morning. So I'd really like to say a big thank you to our speakers there, because I know that in today's audience we have a range of businesses from across the region, both public, private and third sector. We have researchers, staff and students from across the university. The list goes on. And what's really important is this community is for you, so your feedback is important to us. So please engage with us. Give us your feedback on today's event. Give us the ideas and themes, the topics, the ideas that you really want us to bring forward in the same format as today or in other ways, so that we can really make sure that this is a community driven for and working for you, because that's what we're here for. So I'm sure in the link there's going to be in the chat function, there's going to be the link to how you can give us that feedback and how you can move forward on that. I also have a couple of other things I'd like to touch on today, really, which is a request, and we heard it there in the last talk by Andy, of the challenges that you have around how we move towards sustainability. I'd really like to understand as businesses, as individuals, how we move towards a more sustainable future for both ourselves and our planet. But for that, we need to understand how we adapt and change and make available training, support, research, apprenticeships, and how those actually are going to benefit the locality where we all work and live. So please, can I ask you to share that information with me, that knowledge with me, and as a team we will come back to you on that. And I think that the best way of doing that is contacting us on the business growth email, putting sustainability support in the title, and we will come back to you, because we really want to take that conversation forward from today's talk. So moving on, it's also just to say, we mentioned this in the very first talk, how currently our business support programs are doing that, and really to remind you about the sustainability boot camp that we're running about big impact, small footprint, and that's starting on the 20th of April. And that boot camp is really designed for businesses that want to grow in a sustainable way, maximising their social, environmental and the financial impact. And please, again, I think the link will be shared to that, and it will definitely come out in the follow-up. I'd really push you towards that if that's something that you think we can help. So great. Let's keep communicating. Please follow us on social media. Please ask us about our Commercial Connections eShot newsletter, which covers and outlines the information that we've been discussed today. And we really want to get that out there and make sure you're engaging with us and we're engaging with you. So finally, thank you for your participation. We couldn't do these events or run these events if we weren't going to gain that knowledge from you. So hopefully I'm going to be welcoming you or wrapping up the next event. Maybe even we'll be back in the same room, and wouldn't that be great? So from all of us, I'd like to say thank you, stay safe, look after yourselves, and we look forward to continuing our conversation. Goodbye.